Mike Allen joins me from Axios, Axios.com. His newsletter, Axios AM, is a must-read every morning. Good morning, Mike. Where did you spend your weekend? Michael's gone as usual. Mike? I bet you his phone's
Arlington,
on.
Virginia is reopened. Walking around here, walked across the bridge into Georgetown, into downtown, where so many people streaming into D.C. near the White House, lots of families, lots of people with their kids. Very inspiring weekend and all calm. A week ago, Friday night, Saturday night, so brutal for D.C. and the signs of that are still here. All of Georgetown, all of downtown boarded up. Even stores that are open, they're boarded up, and they just open up their boarded up door.
Yeah, I believe now the violence is behind us. I believe the demonstrations might continue. I think we are in for a surge of coronavirus in D.C., as has happened in California. But yesterday, one observer of the protest said it's like a giant block party. It was not an angry crowd. And I thought that is generally true across the United States, as far as I can tell from the coverage. Agree or disagree, Mike Allen?
No, that's true, both from the coverage and from my real-life observation, and the numbers, the passion, the signs around the world. So fascinating that not just in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, but you see real pushes for real change in other countries. In the UK, a push for change in Axios AM this morning. We have one of the remarkable symbols of this moment that we're in, like a once-in-a-century moment in Bristol, England, statue of a slave trader that stood for 195 years and toppled off its pedestals to great cheers from the crowd, and then hauled into a harbor where he had once imported Africans as part of his business, and his statue hefted headfirst into the drink.
And what's remarkable to me about that story is that it had been there for 195 years. Britain was the first to end the slave trade and imposed its abolition on the world. I do not know how that happened, but I was grieved, as was Home Secretary Patel, that Winston Churchill was defaced in Great Britain yesterday. Winston Churchill, who saved the world from fascism, who was the greatest man of the last century and maybe the millennium. Some would argue Martin Luther. But I just can't imagine most of Britain agreeing with that. I want to go to the second element of this morning's Axios AM newsletter, Mike, because I began the Hugh Hewitt rundown, which I do every show, by noting that Defund Police became the de facto platform of the Democratic Party yesterday. Defund the Police is nuts. Now, you objectively report that Mayor Jacob Fry is shouted out of a demonstration after he refused it. But the context, as you quote, Black Lives Matter co-founder Alicia Garza told Meet the Press that Defund the Police aren't about eliminating police department, but about reinvesting funds towards the resources that our communities need. I'm sorry, Mike, that's not the message America got yesterday. Defund the police means defund the police. Take money away from the police. I think that Joe Biden's worst day of the year was yesterday because of Defund the Police. Your comments?
Well, there's three rather significant Democrats in America. One of them is named Joe Biden. One of them is named Speaker Pelosi. One of them is named Leader Chuck Schumer. And they're talking about police reform. And Democrats this week unveiling their sweeping police reform bill. That's very different. And that's different than what you've been hearing over the weekend. And they're the ones who can make things happen at the national level. And Joe Biden, of course, can drive a conversation throughout the party. But you're right. Like this, there's a disconnect between what activists want, what their leaders want, and that's always hard to navigate in a loud, emotional time.
Yeah, the collapse of the media in America yesterday was complete. I essayed about this in the Washington Post yesterday, Media Heal Thyself, because when the demand is made to defund the police, the obligation becomes, in every setting where there's anyone saying, I am Joe Biden, I am Nancy Pelosi, I am Chuck Schumer, or I am supporting them like General Powell, the immediate question should be, do you support defund the police? Because they're going to say blah, 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 and they're going to try and hedge because they know it's an insane proposition. But they should be pressed by the media. But because the media is left-wing, overwhelmingly, Mike Allen, as I argued in the Post yesterday, and it will post shortly at the Post on the landing page, the media is all occupied territory, and they don't push that question.
Hugh, I am going to push back.
Go right ahead. I'm happy. Go ahead.
So Axios is among the news organizations that take a clinical approach to the news. We don't love on people. We don't hate on people. Like, we bring a clear eye to the news. And Hugh, if you read Jonathan Swan, if you read Deanna Raboa, if you read Amy, if you read Amy Harder, if you read our coverage with a fair eye, you will agree that is true.
Now, I read Axios every day, Mike, but I do not read in number 2, defund the police gains momentum. I do not read a quote from Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer being asked the question directly. I don't read anywhere the Democrats having to carry the burden of this insane proposition forward into the fall, which they will be obliged to do by me and by everybody else. They own it. And every single person who's ever called 911 is thinking to themselves, that's crazy. The mayor of D.C. planted Black Lives Matter on the street, which is fine. Then she added equals defund the police, which is not. And so it is a proposition of the Democratic Party and their elites that they have to answer. And if Republicans had said that, every one of them would have been asked to defend it. So Axios did not ask anyone to defend it. So that is a swing and a miss on Axios' part, Mike. And you know I love you. It's just you folks do not press Democrats with the hardest questions. The floor is yours.
2 things about that. One, the Biden campaign has been asked about that. You're right that they're going to have to answer it. We're going to have Speaker Pelosi, Leader Schumer out today talking about police reform, which is different. And you pointed out the comments by Black Lives Matter co-founder Alicia Garza, pointing out that the real message here is more resources that communities need, not necessarily literally defending police. And you remember Defund ICE, which you relished and savored as well. You should. That's faded as other proposals came in. This is having its day, but very quickly this conversation will be driven by Democrats with power, who include Biden, Pelosi, and Schumer. And for sure, they need to acknowledge this movement, lead this movement. You and I have talked about how genuine and how fervent this push for change is. It's global now. And I think everybody in the country recognizes for sure we need big changes. You ask anyone of any age who's out on the streets of the country, and they will say what's being done now isn't working.
Now, Mike Allen, I spoke with Pastor Mark Whitlock of Reed Temple, Maryland, the largest AME church in the world, on Thursday. I agree with everything you said. That is not responsive to the question of whether or not American media holds the Democratic Party to the same standard that it holds the Republican Party and pushes them as hard as it pushes the Republicans to answer difficult questions. Jake Tapper, for example, is your friend. I can't really call him a friend, but he's my old colleague from the debate days. And Jake had Colin Powell on yesterday. Colin Powell declared for Joe Biden, and he said the president is drifting away from the Constitution. The obvious follow-up at that point is, Colin Powell, do you defend defunding the police? Colin Powell, do you defend abolishing the Electoral College? Colin Powell, do you defend making sure that Electoral College voters do not follow their states but follow the popular vote? Do you defend abolishing the Senate? Do you defend all of the anti-constitutional propositions that the Democratic Party has put forward, because if his argument is, I can't support Donald Trump because he's drifting away from the Constitution. In fact, Trump is the president who's been defending the Constitution. The Democrats are the one who want to fundamentally change it. And that was not asked by Jake. He got a pass. And I think on my side of the aisle, getting a pass, we've had it with having people get passes.
So this is very instructive, because what we see now that you're a single issue voter, and we see that this issue is going to be a way for Republicans who may be unhappy with the president. You've been tough on the president at times. The president is pushing this issue, and this is something that Republicans can agree on and will continue to push. So the way that you're talking about it is for sure illuminating.
Well, what do you mean by illuminating?
It's the sign of where Republican conversation is going, where Republicans want to take the conversation, where you think safe ground is in hard times. At a time when you saw on Meet the Press yesterday, Morning Joe this morning, you see the big graphic NBC Wall Street Journal poll, very respected, showing that 80% of Americans, 80%, think that things are generally out of control. An astonishing poll figure on any question.
Well, I agree with that. I thought things were out of control last week. I think they're back in control this week. But Mike, I'm actually humbled that you consider me to be an influencer and an opinion leader. I don't think I am on this position. I believe it is inherent. It is ingrained in the American people to support the police and to want them to be better. But defund the police, I think it was instantaneously recognized by people as a radical point of view that not one Democrat,
a different way to say it.
But let me ask you a question. Did one Democrat denounce defund the police this weekend, to your knowledge? One?
I don't know the answer to that, Hugh, but I will say that you're right that the police are close to home. That ICE, for a lot of people, is abstract or distant.
Yes.
But everybody knows they're police.
And everybody has a cop for a friend, and the idea that they are the enemy. Well, Mike Allen, we'll continue the conversation next week. Make sure you read Axios AM every single weekend, because Mike and I get into it occasionally, but we always do so as friends.